In the life of Fred, a large, gentle black Labrador, every day was a study in routine. He was a simple soul, loyal, quiet, and profoundly patient. His world revolved around the ancient grounds of Mountfitchet Castle, a place of historical echo, yet a modern sanctuary for abandoned creatures. But the most powerful stories are those where instinct fails and a heart finds a new, terrifying purpose. On one quiet afternoon, the silence of the grounds was broken by the frantic search for a mother, and Fred found himself looking down at a cluster of tiny, shivering miracles. He was a dog, and they were his natural opposite, yet he was compelled to stay. Now, let's enter their world. If you're already enjoying this story, a quick like and share makes all the difference. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from today. The setting for this unlikely drama is Mountfitchet Castle in Essex, England, a place where history and nature intersect. It is a reconstructed Norman fort, yes, but for many animals, it is simply a vast green sanctuary. The groundskeepers here, particularly Jeremy Goldsmith, are accustomed to the unconventional. They embrace the chaos of a working animal rescue, the orphaned, the injured, and the simply lost. Fred, the black Labrador, was a fixture of this environment. He was Mr. Goldsmith's trusted companion and a gentle soul who watched over the grounds with quiet authority. Fred's life was an ordered existence of patrols, greetings, and long, peaceful naps in the sun. He was a dog of habit, utterly reliable. But that reliability was soon to be tested. The castle grounds were also home to a clutch of mallard ducks. One spring afternoon, a fox, the silent antagonist of the natural world, managed to breach the enclosure. The tragedy was swift and irreversible, leaving behind a small nest and a handful of newly hatched ducklings. The loss was devastating, leaving the tiny, fragile creatures alone. The castle staff knew the clock was ticking. Ducklings require constant warmth and an immediate parental presence. Without it, they chill rapidly and cannot survive the first night. The staff gathered the orphans, unsure of their next step. They had incubator boxes and heat lamps, of course, but what they truly needed was a mother, a source of comfort, warmth, and relentless protection. The human caretakers looked at the incubator. The animals, however, found their own solution. It was Fred, the loyal, predictable dog, who, drawn by the distressed scent of the orphans, made his way to the small basket containing the survivors. He looked down at the feather-light, struggling lives, and the ancient code of his breed was overridden by something far deeper, far more complex than instinct. The moment of the adoption was a study in quiet observation. Fred, the powerful Labrador, had simply placed his massive head near the basket. There was no bark, no playful nudge, just a profound stillness that the tiny creatures somehow sensed was safe. The castle staff watched nervously. A dog's natural instinct, especially around small, fluttering things, is often driven by a prey drive or playful curiosity that could be fatal to ducklings. But Fred did the opposite. He lay down beside the basket, his warm, heavy body a natural shield against the cold evening air. The castle owner, Mr. Goldsmith, hesitantly made a choice, trusting the deep-seated empathy he had always seen in his dog. He gently placed one of the smallest ducklings, later named Dennis, onto Fred's thick coat. This tiny contact was the turning point. Fred did not flinch. He did not stir. He remained utterly motionless, accepting the new life that sought his protection. Within minutes, the remaining ducklings were placed onto their giant surrogate father, burrowing into the warmth and the gentle rhythm of his breath. The dog's deep instinct to guard and nurture had completely replaced his instinct to chase. What began as a tragedy of loss became a miracle of cross-species acceptance. The following days settled into a rhythm defined by the needs of the ducklings and the patience of Fred. It was a 24-hour commitment that Fred accepted without question. The initial few hours had been the most critical. The ducklings required constant thermal regulation, and Fred's great soft body provided a living, breathing incubator. They nestled under his chin, slept draped across his back, and burrowed deep into the dense fur of his chest. This was their new normal. The most extraordinary part of the bond was the way Fred adapted his behavior. The Labrador, known for his playful bursts of energy and enthusiastic tail wags, became a creature of slow, deliberate movements. When he needed to stand, he did so with the utmost care, lifting one heavy paw at a time, ensuring not a single tiny life was crushed beneath him. When the ducklings were active, exploring the world around them, Fred remained their anchor. They would follow him everywhere, a flotilla of yellow fluff trailing the black mass of their surrogate father. This phenomenon is known as imprinting, the immediate bonding a duckling makes with the first moving creature it sees. They had imprinted on a dog, and Fred, in turn, had accepted the profound responsibility of that bond. The staff, initially anxious, quickly realized that Fred was a superior parent to any human substitute. He provided emotional security that no heat lamp could replicate. The ducklings, particularly little Dennis, were thriving. They learned to communicate with Fred not through barks or quacks, but through proximity and subtle movements. When they chirped with distress, Fred would respond not with noise, but with the quiet reassurance of his presence, perhaps a slow lowering of his head. They would climb onto him as he slept, treating his broad back like a secure, moving island. The simple act of the dog lying down became the core of their safety. We must understand that this was more than just tolerance. It was active, reciprocal affection. Fred needed them as much as they needed him. For a dog that had always been loyal, these tiny beings gave him a new, focused purpose. His guardianship was absolute, a silent promise made between a gentle dog and a vulnerable brood. He had become the father figure of the flock. Their presence brought a quiet joy and a deep sense of completeness to his otherwise predictable world. The true science of this bond is not in the species. It is in the shared need for family. As days turned into weeks, the greatest challenge to Fred's guardianship was not an external predator, but the very nature of his adopted children. Ducklings grow at an astonishing rate. The tiny, vulnerable bundles of fluff began to transform into young birds, driven by innate, powerful instincts. They were no longer content to simply nestle in fur. They were meant for the water. This introduced a difficult conflict for Fred. While Labradors are famously water-loving dogs, Fred's instinct to protect his delicate charges was now at odds with their biological imperative to swim. The first trip to the water's edge was filled with palpable tension. The ducklings waddled with wobbly determination towards the pond on the sanctuary grounds. Fred followed closely, pacing the perimeter of the grass. He watched them enter the water, the element they were born for, yet the one place he could not physically shield them. The water was a proving ground, not just for the ducklings, but for Fred's trust in their resilience. He would stand at the bank, his brow furrowed in a manner that the staff knew meant deep concern. He would often dip his nose into the water, a massive black sentinel, simply to keep contact with the little heads bobbing nearby. The inherent dangers of the outside world, though, remained. The castle grounds were large and contained other animals, including the occasional stray dog or a bird of prey circling overhead. Fred's presence became the defense mechanism. If a curious territorial goose approached the flock, a single low growl from Fred was enough to send it retreating. He was the moving four-legged fence around their fragile existence. The bond had evolved from providing simple warmth to acting as a formidable, instinct-defying bodyguard. He had to learn how to be a father to a family that was increasingly less dependent on him, yet still relying on his steadfast presence. This phase was about letting go just enough to let them grow, while remaining near enough to intercept danger. Fred's lesson was one of quiet faith, a guardian who understood that love sometimes means standing back. The emotional crest of Fred's journey arrived not with a moment of high drama, but with the quiet understanding that his work was nearly done. The ducklings, now almost unrecognizable as the tiny fluff balls first placed upon his back, were adolescents. Their adult feathers were coming in, and their waddles had given way to confident gliding steps. They were ducks now, not dependents. They spent more time exploring the large pond, honing their flight muscles, and practicing the complex social rituals of their own kind. The need for the Labrador's physical warmth had entirely evaporated. The need for his constant proximity was fading. Fred, the dedicated surrogate father, felt the change first. There were mornings when he woke and found his flank empty. He would rise, stretch his large frame, and quietly watch them from the shoreline. They no longer rushed to him for comfort, but for a lingering, deep-seated connection. When they swam, Fred would lie down at the water's edge, his great head resting on his paws. This quiet vigil, this patient waiting, was the final, purest expression of his love. It was a love that understood the necessity of distance for growth. The staff, having documented every gentle nuzzle, every protective stance, knew this chapter was closing. The young ducks were ready for the next inevitable step, full independence. They needed to join the wild flocks and migrate. Fred had given them life. Now he had to give them freedom. The gentle giant's heart ached with the quiet pride of a parent who has successfully prepared his children for the world. It was an empty space in his routine, a massive void where a tiny, chirping life used to be. This moment, where love becomes separation, is the ultimate sacrifice of the nurturer. The ducks, led by the confident Dennis, eventually took their place among the wild inhabitants of the castle grounds. They learned to fly, to forage, and to navigate the complexities of their new life. But the bond, once forged in necessity and warmth, did not vanish. Even as they grew fully independent, the ducks would often return to the familiar, comforting sight of the large black dog. Fred would continue his gentle watch, a silent acknowledgement of the family that grew and flew away. The true measure of Fred's story lies not in the anomaly of the friendship, but in the universal truth it revealed. This narrative, captured in quiet moments by the sanctuary staff, became a profound testament to empathy. It showed us that the primal drive to nurture transcends the rigid lines of taxonomy and evolution. Fred, the Labrador, demonstrated a higher form of love, one devoid of biological expectation or reward. He responded only to vulnerability. His story is now an enduring fable for the modern age, a reminder that deep compassion exists in the least expected places. The sanctuary's grounds remain a testament to this truth. But the story of Fred and the ducklings resonates far beyond the castle walls. It asks us to look closer at our own capacity for kindness. It is a quiet, powerful challenge to the notion that we are divided by instinct. Fred's legacy is a legacy of softness, proving that a single, gentle heart can rewrite the rules of the wild and offer healing to the world. The shadows lengthen across the grass, but the warmth of the memory remains. Fred, the loyal dog, redefined what it means to be a protector, a parent, and a friend. We have traveled far into the quiet heart of this profound connection, witnessing a life defined by gentle sacrifice and unconditional devotion. This simple story of a Labrador and a tiny, struggling flock is a poignant mirror reflecting the pure, uncomplicated potential for good that exists within every living thing, urging us to carry that softness forward into our own lives. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to light. We have a question for you. What was the single moment in this story that resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one.